Hi there, it's Layle Koncar. Today we're going to take a look at one of the exclusive Scrapbook.com products, the water brushes. The water brushes come in two different styles. You have the flat styles and you have the rounded styles or rounded tips. So we'll talk kind of about the differences and some great techniques that you can use with them. So we will be looking at the flat styles. They come in three different sizes. You have a small tip, a medium tip, and a large tip. And I think it's helpful to start out by just showing you how they open and how you can refill them. And that's one of the best benefits about them, is that they are refillable. So you have your little brush here, it's all self-contained. And to open it, I'm going to twist counterclockwise. So as I twist counterclockwise, that lid is going to come off. And then generally what I do to refill them is I just take them into the bathroom or the kitchen sink and I let the water drip in. That seems to be the easiest way to refill those little guys. And then when I put the tip back on, I am now twisting clockwise. So we're going to take a look at 5 different techniques using those wonderful brushes. All right. The first one we're going to look at is a splatter technique. So I'm going to take the medium tip, the medium flat tip, and I'm going to grab a piece of watercolor paper. And I have cut this watercolor paper down because for me, one of the most important things when you're working with something like this, especially if you're new to it, is that you give yourself permission to play. So you're not worried about messing up. As long as you play and kind of get a feel for things, then it's fun and easy. So I have this already filled with water, and I'm going to come in and I'm going to use my watercolor and just kind of dab there in that blue. So I've got a good amount of water on there, and I'm just going to flick that brush until I get some splatters. And I can move that around to get as much or as little coverage as I like. Now, the heaviness of that color is going to depend on how much water I have in my brush, in my tip. So if I want a little bit lighter, I can add more water. If I want it a little bit darker, I can use a little bit less water. So that's our first technique, doing splatters. The next technique that we're going to take a look at is actually using a straw to blow the ink. So on this one, I'm actually going to take that same brush, but here I want to clean it. So I'm going to take a paper towel and start wiping a little bit of that ink off. And then I'm just squeezing some water through. So I don't have to have a reservoir or something to like dip my brush in. I already have the water there to help clean it. And then I am going to dip into the pink. And I'll take another one of my little squares. Oh, I need a little bit more color in there. All right. And then I'm going to take a regular everyday straw. I have a couple different kinds that I like to keep on hand. I have a plastic disposable one, but then I also have a plastic kind of a harder straw. All right, so I'm going to take my little straw, and all I'm going to do is blow very lightly. And I'm going to start to blow that ink into different areas. All right. So as you can see, my ink is starting to blow around. And if I were to continue with that, I would end up with something like that. Now, if I have less water, I will get a little bit more coverage. More water, again, it's going to be a little bit lighter. Sometimes I'll also maybe have a heat tool that I can dry that off pretty quickly, or I will set that off aside and make sure I can let that dry. The next technique that we're going to do is we're going to take a clear toner sheet, kind of like a piece of acetate. So I have taken one of the clear toner sheets. These come in 8.5 by 11 sheets, and I just cut this down. And I am going to take my brush, and let's do green on this one. I want to make sure that I have enough water there. I'm going to deposit some color onto that toner sheet like so. And then I'll bring in my watercolor paper, and I'm just going to turn that over and then start to move my finger around. So I'm depositing that ink in different places. So I can do that once, or I can do that multiple times and really even pick that up, since I still have a little bit of ink left on little bit of watercolor ink on that sheet and continue to move it around. This is another fun little technique there. That is using the watercolors. Now I can do the exact same thing with a brush marker. So let's kind of wipe this little guy off a little bit so I get rid of a little bit of that green. I'm going to get a little bit more water. So I have a little empty one here that has a little bit more water to it. And I'm just going to color directly on that toner sheet, the acetate. I'll add a little bit of water. So the nice thing about this is I can mix my own colors. If I have markers, I can mix my own colors. And that even makes things a little bit more portable than even a small watercolor set like that. So let's take that, bring in another sheet, turn that upside down. And I get a very similar look to what I did with the watercolor using a brush marker. Okay, for our third technique, we're actually going to create a ombre effect with brush markers and our water brush. So I have pulled 3 different colors of brush markers here. And when you're doing this technique, it's nice to get your markers that are kind of in the same color family so that your ombre looks nice together. So I'm going to start with my lightest color, which is the yellow. And I will start with that in the middle. And I'm just lightly going to brush the color on there. And then I'm going to take a complementary color. So I will do my orange here on top. And then down below, I will do the pink. All right. Then I'm going to take my water brush and I'm going to start in the middle. And the reason I want to start in the middle is because that's the lightest color. And I don't want to kind of transfer some of the colors, the darker colors, into that lighter color. And I am very gently just brushing that water brush across that marker that I deposited on the watercolor paper. The lighter I want that to be, the more water I add. And that's one of the nice things here is that I can control the distribution of the water to get the color where I want it. Now, because I'm in a light color here, I don't necessarily have to clean my brush before moving up to the next color. So I am now just adding a little bit more water. Now that line is probably a little bit stronger than I want it to be, but I'm going to show you kind of a technique that you can use a transfer with that. So I'm going to clean that off a little bit, and then we will get that red. As I said, my lines are a little bit strong. So what I actually want to do is I'm going to take that ombre and I'm going to come in and I'm going to do a transfer. And I'm going to do a transfer by just taking a second piece of watercolor paper and putting that first piece on top of it. With pretty good pressure, applying my fingers over the top of that to transfer that ink. And then I start to get a really nice ombre effect. The more water I have on there, the heavier that effect will be. So there's a finished example of a lighter transfer and then a much heavier transfer, so I don't see as much of the lines. And I have a really nice ombre effect there. And those are using the water brush and brush markers. The fourth technique we're going to take a look at, because this one is really fun. This is using regular old table salt. So I have 2 different examples here. There's a green and there is a pink. And this is so easy to do, but it's a really fun, kind of different technique. So we're going to bring back our little pad here, and I've just added some regular table salt. I am going to grab another one of my brushes, and let's do this pink. And I am just brushing my watercolor there. This is another reason why it's really helpful, I think, to have one of your, like a craft mat, because as you can see, I'm going off the side a little bit. Then I'm going to take my regular, everyday old table salt, and I am just going to sprinkle that on top. Now, that needs to dry pretty completely before we'll start to see those crystals kind of separate. But when it is dry, that is the effect that I'm going to get. So it's just really kind of a different look than you would have with your regular watercolor and that brush. The next one we're going to take a look at, this is using a masking fluid. All right, so here I've used some Nuvo masking fluid to create this really neat mask on my watercolor. So the way we're going to do that is we're going to grab our little masking fluid here. Now, I have some pretty good looking circles here. They're pretty round and pretty complete. And my tip for doing that is to use a pencil eraser. So this is just a regular old pencil eraser. I am going to really shake this up. And I recommend that you do this in a pretty well ventilated area. When you open this, it's very strong. So I'm going to just put a little bit of that right there on my craft mat. And then I will take my eraser and I'm just going to dip in that. So I will continually kind of come through, make my little random dips. If I want to have different size circles, it's a little bit harder to find different size erasers, but to get a smaller circle, what really works is if you take a sewing pin, one of the sewing pins that has like the little ball on the end, that will make really great little circles for you. And a tip there is you can even take that little pin and stick it in the end of an eraser so you have a little bit of a longer applicator to work with. All right, so now this I want to let dry completely. Once it is completely dry, it will look like this. It looks like it's still wet. It is not. It's just kind of it's latex. So it kind of has that little bit shiny latex look to it. And now I can apply my watercolor right over the top of that. So let's go ahead and use that pink again, just since we have that pink going. Get a little bit more water in there so it's a little bit easier. Anytime I need more water, all I have to do is just squeeze that little reservoir. I don't have to kind of, have a little cup here and dip and dip and dip. A lot of times when I'm doing that, water starts to get everywhere and potential for spills, right? So normally I would completely let this dry. So I'm just going to kind of pat this dry a little bit. And then we'll come back to one of my pre-done samples. So the magic of having things pre-done, we don't have to wait for that to dry. All I'm going to do is very lightly start to roll that mask off. And this is a really important tip here. As you're rolling, roll towards the center. You don't want to roll towards the edges. If you start rolling towards the edges, you run the risk of actually rolling a little bit of that paper off, which isn't necessarily a bad thing. But if you roll that paper off, then you're also going to roll some of the color off. So you'll have little kind of weird looking offshoots of your circles. So I would just keep rolling those little guys off until I had my beautifully finished product. All right, you guys, so those are 5 really fun techniques using the exclusive water brushes from Scrapbook.com. Something like this, you guys, as I said, I really encourage you to just get out your tools, get out your supplies, and give yourself permission to play. A lot of times I think you'll be really surprised with the outcome. Thanks for watching. If you liked this video and want to see more from Scrapbook.com, please like, share, subscribe, and leave a message. Happiness is life handmade.